Thank you very much. I'm Luca Schiavo from ERRA Secretariat, Regulatory Specialist, and today we discuss about the Spanish and Portuguese blackout on 28 April. I start from this quotation of the Evangelium, Vigilate itaque, quia nescitis diem neque oram. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. That's an interesting parable, you know, the history in the Evangelium, where is a sort of first blackout in the story of religion, probably, because some ladies are without the oil of their lamps. They are waiting for the spouse, and they are without oil for their lamps, so they are without lights. And the parables ends with these words that I found extremely relevant for our discussion today, because exactly watch therefore is probably what didn't happen that day. Today we'll try to look at what happened on 28 April, and we start from the day before. You know that in the day-ahead market, prices are set the day before. And traditionally, blackouts are associated with lack of adequacy, generation adequacy. But after energy transition, the world is upside down, the electrical world is upside down. So, as a sort of paradox, the Spanish system, and not only the Spanish system, the whole Europe, that day had energy in abundance. And this is clear because prices, market prices on the day-ahead market were negative. Not only in Spain, but in France, in Germany, even in Poland. What does it mean, negative prices? It means that there is too much energy produced. And so producers have to pay instead to gain from producing. And negative prices tend to occur when there is a low load day, typically Sundays. But it was Monday. It was an ordinary work day. Nonetheless, something wrong happened somewhere. So here, this is a presentation for regulators. And this was the first blackout in the era of renewables. So the question for regulator is, maybe something happened wrong due to wrong rules? This is the question that we have in mind now. But as a wider picture, we have to consider that we are no longer, at least in Western Europe, in the scarcity paradigm. We are going towards a totally different paradigm, an abundance paradigm. And I suggest you to read this paper from Oxford Energy Institute about this change. Look at Spain. Spain is a country with low interconnection with France, but also Portugal. Portugal is very well interconnected with Spain, and with a relatively small interconnection, 1.3 gigawatt with Morocco. Remember that some important points to look when we discuss blackout are, first, frequency control. Frequency control is always the most important indicator for blackout, because blackout occurs when frequency goes out of the operational window of frequency. But there is another important indicator that is voltage, and also voltage has its operational window. Both frequency and voltage must stay within limits. lower and upper limits. And of course, there are different tools that the TSO and DSO, especially frequency, only the TSO, voltage, both DSO and TSO, can operate to stay in the stated limits. Interconnection have roles, and what is important to say, I will return on that, the Iberian Peninsula already separated from the rest of Europe in 2021 without blackout. So the separation of the peninsula from the rest of Europe is not necessarily associated with blackout. Another important topic is topology of the network. Of course, we are here in high voltage. So high voltage is operated with n-1 or even n-2 rule, meaning that one fault in meshed grid can be absorbed without interruption. There are also other critical aspects. One of these is inertia. The picture in this chart is from another paper from Oxford Energy Institute that I also suggest you. The inertia is what makes the change of frequency more rapid or less rapid. And in this analogy, you see the change of frequency, the analogy is with the change of the level of the pool in relationship to the difference of water in and water out. Water in is like generation, water out is like demand. If they are balanced, the level is the same. If they are unbalanced, the level change. But how fast change the level? It changes faster if the pool is smaller, if it has less inertia. So inertia is very important because when something occurs in frequency, if there is less inertia, it occurs more rapidly. And therefore, it's more difficult to mitigate this change in frequency. And inertia is decreasing because the generation units that are connected to the network, not directly like old conventional generation, but through so-called inverters that are photovoltaics, wind, unless there are specific regulation named grid forming that are still very innovative, this kind of generation don't procure inertia to the system. Only conventional generation so far procure inertia, although this synthetic inertia from wind and solar can be procured, but this is a very innovative process. And there are also other issues that I don't enter in details. One of the most important is storage, BESS, battery energy storage system. Unfortunately, Spain didn't have storage at the time of event. At the moment of incident, the demand in Spain was 25 gigawatt. The generation availability is 39 gigawatt. This data comes from the transparency website of the Spanish TSO, Transmission System Operator, Red Eléctrica de España. So you see, no problem of adequacy. There was a lot of generation available, but more than 3/4 of generation in that very moment, at the blackout instant, came from renewable, 77%. And most of these was connected through inverters, so didn't procure inertia to the system. Nonetheless, according to ENTSO-E is the association in Europe of transmission system operator. According to this estimation, released on September 2nd, so after the blackout, the level of inertia was 118 gigawatt per second. That is acceptable, within the acceptable limit at national level. So it means that everything is normal. So what was the strange? One strange thing was the gap of conventional generation that was able to give what is called voltage control. Voltage control is a specific ancillary service that is decided by the TSO. REE is the TSO, after looking at the day-ahead market. And of course, in the day-ahead market, you can see in the chart on the right side, when solar increase after 8 o'clock in the morning, you see the yellow bars, necessarily thermal generation decrease because the demand the demand is not infinite. So the more the sun is there, the less conventional generation you need. But the TSO must decide what is called technical restriction. So at least some minimum conventional generation, thermal generation is needed for voltage regulation. That day, only 11 units, all the Spain, for the whole Spain, were requested by the TSO. 11 units is the minimum for Spain in the year, probably in the history. But this was compliant with regulation. And the regulation was this unknown, I would say, procedura operativa, PO, means operational procedure 7.4. So you can say no rule was broken. The point was that rules were designed for a different world. In fact, you see, the procedure 7.4 is dated 18 March 2000, not 2020, 2000. In 2000, no renewables at all were present, not only Spain, I mean, in Europe, elsewhere. So this procedure was very, very, very old. And that day gave probably its maximum effect, bad effect, I would say. It is not the only one problem. There are many other problems. For instance, the fact that this procedure does not consider eligible for voltage control other kind of generation, although they are thermal, like gas. For instance, in Spain, there are so-called thermosolar. Thermosolar are renewable plants because they are solar, but are not inverter based because they have a sort of turbine, so they are like gas for the other rest of the plant. But these thermosolar units are not allowed to contribute to generation because of the old procedure, although they are absolutely adequate for that. And there are other issues like fixed power factor for renewables. So there is no role for renewables to contribute somehow to voltage control. So all the rules for voltage control are very inadequate. All this history, if you want, is available in a paper that me and a professor from Politecnico di Milano have written and is available. Before the event, that's interesting, there were some warnings. Not only the same day, but also some days before the event, distribution networks connected to the Spanish system were impacted by over voltages. Over voltages. You know, the voltage in distribution system depends from the voltage in transmission system. So if there is an over voltage in distribution system, it means that something is not going well, let's say, in transmission system under the viewpoint of voltage. And it occurred both on 22 April and 28 April in the morning. These charts are very technical and are drawn from a very important paper, report by Inestec, that is a very clever institute of research on power system from Portugal. So there were some warnings in voltage, but especially there were other two events named inter-area oscillations, and here the things are more difficult. Oscillations are changes in power flows that occur either from one area to another area, for instance, in the peninsula, or even from one area to another area of the whole Europe. And two of these events occurred, one at 12:03 and the second at 12:19. So only a few minutes before the event. These inter-area oscillations are not per se a very dangerous problem, but there is a protocol to damp, to mitigate these oscillations. And according to this protocol, interconnection must be put in a given way that is named constant DC power. And constant DC power means that the flow to France is independent of what happens in Spain, and this is not a good thing, because if you lose generation in Spain, you should reduce the export to France. And indeed, with constant DC power, the system continue to send power to France, even if they lose generation in Spain. So this is not good point. But especially, there was a huge manual maneuver on the network to damp inter-area oscillation. This maneuver have been one of the main problems for the system. And then it happened, the collapse. A very first generation loss happened in Granada, but it had a very little dimension, 350 megawatt. Remember, the demand was around 30 gigawatt, so really small in respect of the rest. And indeed, you see, after this first event, the frequency deviates from 50, but not so much yet. Only at the second event, that is a second generation loss, you see the frequency starts to have a collapse, and in a very short time, you see the time frame is only seconds, in few seconds, we have this collapse. We make this bigger, and we can see there is this little step where the defense system means the automation of the network, try to cope with the problem of frequency collapse, but is not designed to face such a big effect. There was no storage at the moment, and then the collapse is going on. Now we have, if it works, a short video of what happened in Spain.
Millions of people across Spain and Portugal have been hit by massive power cuts. Trains stopped, planes were grounded, and there was chaos on the roads as traffic lights failed. Internet and mobile phone networks are down. Shops and businesses were plunged into darkness, and there's been panic buying. Well, it isn't yet clear what has caused the blackouts, but a cyber attack appears to have been ruled out. This report from Ellie Price.
Tonight, it's not as dark as many had feared it could be, for this street in Madrid at least.
An hour and a half ago, the light's back, but there are certain neighbourhoods in Madrid that haven't done it. It's been a bit of a fearful day, but now it seems that all is over.
But earlier, this was the metro system in Porto. A similar picture in other big cities as the outage hit Spain and Portugal, as well as parts of southern France this morning. Back in Spain, locals helped stranded passengers as trains literally stopped in their tracks. The entire rail network ground to a halt. This one midway between Seville and Madrid. For those who chose to drive, more misery. This is what happened as soon as the traffic lights stopped working. The centre of Madrid quickly grinding to a standstill.
I don't understand anything. I just don't know who to turn to. My daughter's in Barcelona about to give birth. We're going to miss the train to get there and see her.
There were flight delays, cancellations and frustrations in both countries, though Lisbon airport was the worst hit. Lack of phone signal quickly became problematic for everyone, with businesses shutting up shop, unable to keep the lights on or take card payments, which then meant people rushed to take out cash. Where retailers could stay open, shoppers came to get what they could, the shelves emptying quickly in some areas.
Is it bothering you like this?
Play was suspended at the Madrid Open, including for Britain's Jacob Fernley, as a camera got stuck in the way and the electronic line judges and scoreboard stopped working. The rest of the day's action at the tournament was called off. Spectators had to leave in the dark. The Portuguese government has ruled out a cyber attack, but tonight Spain's Prime Minister said all causes would be investigated as they asked people to only use their mobile phones responsibly.
Telecommunications are now at a critical moment. It may be a few hours until we can fully recover electricity, and therefore we need to make short calls and only use the emergency number if it's really necessary.
Things may be starting to look a little more normal for some, but tonight the Spanish government says less than half of the country's energy demand has been recovered. Portugal's main power operator has said it could take a week to return to full normality. Ellie Price, BBC News.
Okay, this was the life in Spain during the blackout. Not easy life. Indeed, in the other countries, in the neighboring countries, the blackout was avoided, apart Portugal. In France, you see the yellow curve. It seems a heart attack. So probably France, that had a small blackout in the region border with Spain, but for a short time, could risk to have a larger blackout, because this up and down of frequency is really at the limit. So it could be even worse. It could be even worse. While you see the rest of countries, for instance, Orange, Germany, and Poland even, were impacted much less. The more you are far, the less you are impacted. And this is a point of interconnection. I say that interconnection are like marriage. We are united in the destiny, bad and good. So interconnection are good, but can be also bad in both sense. When I wrote the paper, the previous paper that I quoted, I received a mail from US because I noted that the more generation was lost, the higher voltage there was recorded. And it is actually against physics law, because as we have learned, the less generation, the less voltage, in short. But there was another technical problems, especially related to the maneuvers done to mitigate inter-area oscillations that were meshing the grids and therefore increasing the voltage in the lines. And therefore, there was this strange effect that you see on this chart. We have the voltage on the axis, on the left axis. And this, for instance, the red line. You see, the red line is increasing slowly, and then fast increasing. The dotted line is the upper limit. Above this upper limit, it's consequential that generation unit can trip off, can disconnect from the grid. This is named overvoltage disconnection. Is foreseen. It's foreseen. And of course, if there is no generation, you see the frequency collapse and the voltage increase. So the two things were incredibly together. That is still under investigation by ENTSO-E because it was the first time in such a visible manner, probably in the history of blackouts. But there was another point, that is, voltage control is a local issue. And why was not selected? Why is not such, we say, confined, isolated somehow? The answer is in the connection requirement at distribution level. Here we look at the connection, the interrelation between transmission and connection and distribution. Okay, solar units are both connected at transmission, but also at distribution level. And this is another very weak point. The rule, because we are regulators, we look at rules. Connection requirement for distribution connection, distributed generation connection require that this unit may disconnect after 1 second if the voltage is above 10% of the nominal voltage. 1 second is extremely short time. And what does it mean, may? It means that they do disconnect after 1 second, if they may. They don't wait more. And so they disconnect simultaneously, because the voltage increase at transmission level, and this increase at transmission level is reflected at distribution level everywhere. And so simultaneously, Spain lost a lot of distributed generation because of this rule, 1 second contextually, simultaneously, in the same moment. And this is a very risky rule, very risky rule. After the event, we have to think of restart. Here I show you the viewpoint of an innocent victim. Portugal is an innocent victim. Portugal is a nation with their own TSO, their own rules, their own voltage control, everything, and with a good interconnection with Spain. The marriage is very strong, and they were in the bad destiny, let's say, together. And here I suggest you to look at this link of the regulator, Portuguese regulator, that wrote a very easy readable paper on what happened from their viewpoint. What is needed to restart are hydro plants, and you see the blue in the very first hours. Blue means hydro, and only after time other plants arrive, after some hours. So the restoration of the transmission system took many hours, let's say 12 hours more or less. After that, of course, many discussions started. Initially, many people said too many renewables. Only one professor in Politecnico di Madrid said, maybe there is another problem. And he said, over voltages are the problem. He was the first one. Then a lot of reports, a lot of contentions, a lot of things, but the most important are three. First, the committee of experts nominated, appointed by the government of Spain, published a report in May, or no, in June, I don't remember exactly, in June. And this report was frank, very frank, especially towards the TSO. The TSO was astonished that somebody else said something about the management of the blackout. Never happened. So the TSO reacted in a manner very rude, I would say, very rude, contesting the committee of experts appointed by the government. And this happened in 2 days. I don't remember the exact dates, maybe 17 June, 18 June, something like that. After some weeks, INESTEC published another report commissioned by, this is Masaid, the Association of Generators in Spain, that have been blamed by the TSO, and the analysis of the INESTEC was probably the most comprehensive at that time. The discussion was enormous, but if you are interested, I suggest you to look at this video. This video, 18 September, is the hearing in the Senate, Spanish Senate, of AELEC, is the Association of Generators. There is a kind woman who is representative of the Association of Generators saying such a statement. I translate from Spanish. The TSO had the problems like an elephant that day and want to solve it with an end. And he concludes saying the fault in forecast is also an non-accomplishment, incumplimento, not accomplishment. So is a problem. What regulatory lesson can we draw from this? First of all, that regulators shall be conscious of their times. Of course, we need consultation, we need hearings, we need revisions, as we have our bureaucracy, of course, but we cannot take years to change important procedures. In that case, the new procedure was submitted in 2024 March. So it was more than 1 year when the event occurred. And it was approved in June, post-disaster. So here, really, regulators have to consider their timeline because it can be critical. The second is to tell the truth. Targets for renewable are very ambitious, but voltage stability are a concern. So voltage stability is not due to RES development, is due to lack of integration, lack of measure to integrate renewables. But if some things are not done, there must be somebody saying to politics, we are moving too fast. So it's important to give signal of prudence. And indeed, after the blackout, the TSO significantly changed the technical restriction. It means that he could do even before the blackout. Because what the TSO did just after, he could do just before. No changes. He could do before. Third, the new rule, the new so-called PO 7.4 has been approved. It will start to enter into force next year, but it's a revolution. It's a new rule, totally new rule, because in the past, there was so-called command and control for voltage regulation. Now we have a so-called market-based regulation. In the past, there was only conventional. Now we have all technologies, renewable, storage, hybrid, and conventional. First, it was a static system. Now there is a dynamic response with real-time voltage orders. There is a market and there was not. There are tests, there are penalties. So here, finally, that's regulation and is needed. In other countries, is already there. Now is also in Spain and is needed because Spain is the most advanced country in Europe with renewables. Another important point is about cooperation among regulators and standardization bodies. Here, I'm proud to say that as Italians, we started a cooperation between regulator ERRA and standardization Italian body CEI, and we obtained a very good result for retrofit. What does it mean? That existing unit at distributed generation level must change their connection requirement and therefore invest, not so much, but they have to sustain cost in order to be sure that this chart is about the frequency requirements in order not to disconnect in case of frequency perturbation, because if you disconnect generation, you increase the problem instead of reducing. Normally you have to disconnect load, but in the distribution network, you have both load and generation. And if you disconnect load, you also risk to disconnect generation, and this is worsening the problem instead of solving. And with this retrofit, Italy obtained a clause from ENTSO-E in 2014. So 10 years ago, Italy intervened on the rule of frequency and voltage as well. The 1 second rule that in Spain was the problem, in Italy was solved 10 years ago. Just to complete, after I completed this presentation, several other things occurred. One was October 3rd, ENTSO-E presented its factual report. It's a very, I would say, heavy report, more than 250 pages. Of course, it's not possible to make a synthesis, but it's a very substantially it confirms that oscillation had a role, the cascade mechanism, many things that I said you today. So for me, it was an important point. But there was also another interesting report just published on October 5. You see how frequent are news on this topic. On October 5, one of the most important universities in Madrid, Comillas, published this report that is also commissioned by Regulators, this must be said, noting that inertia was, yes, on limit, within limit as a rule for the nation, but not in each area, and especially in southern Spain, where the problem occurred, the first problem occurred in Granada, it was much below than the limit. You see the red area. This is a big problem. And it was ignored in the ENTSO-E report. This is a big problem. Last, October 8, you see, every day there is one news. The regulator launched a huge consultation because the TSO asked the regulator for a urgent modification of some procedure, saying that there was the risk of a new blackout. This consultation was reduced by the regulator to 5 days only, and in the end, the proposal of the TSO was only partly approved. One point of this proposal was refused by the regulator, having heard, even though in a very short time, generator viewpoint, because the regulator must be neutral among all parties. So TSO is important, but also network users are. And the regulator must listen to all parts. Thank you for attention, and I suggest you to read this very interesting synthesis in very simple way, written by some friends of mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the ERRA Secretariat for giving me this chance to talk about the blackouts. My presentation is about the common traits and common things happening in blackouts. So I give you a plan to do 5 things before a blackout happens. Let's go for the next slide. So what we should understand is that the new age of blackouts is different from the old one. In the old traditional blackouts, or even happening something like in India and other developing countries, is that demand is surpassing the supply. So this is how traditional blackouts happen. There's too much demand and supply is not enough. But this time, this new age of blackouts more frequently happen when renewables surpass the fossil generation. So we have to be careful about this change. It's not about demand and supply. It is between a supply technology and another supply technology. It's mostly noon and afternoon. We will probably see that when the solar generation is at its highest. It takes longer to understand. Why? Because it is not big plants connected to the transmission grid, but it is lots of small plants connected to deep under the distributed part. And it will be much more complex because of now it's not like mechanics, but inverters and software-based issues are dominant as well. Information gaps are very important. Yeah, you cannot keep silent for so long. You cannot say, I don't know why this happened for so long. You have to be careful because the new age of information also pushes you to solve this problem as soon as possible. The major problem that regulation and others are trying to solve in the energy sector is the coordination problem. But with blackouts, this coordination problem is bigger because you have distributed generators, more players, more interactions, more voltages to check for, more parameters you have to look for. Therefore, coordination problem is bigger. And it's always certain that there's a cybersecurity conspiracy is given. If you keep silent, the first thing that the journals come up is it hacked? Is it hacking happened? Is the cybersecurity thing? And you can never eliminate this option because you have to make sure that every internet connected device has not been hacked. So it's always on the table. And be careful about software related problems. It is not like one switch didn't open. It may become that inverters automatically, for some reason, disconnected. So I gather up a 5-point plan for everyone who hopefully will not have to deal with blackouts, but at least get an understanding of how to have a plan for these situations. And assume that the blackouts are inevitable and will be harder to resolve. First, coordination problem is the root problem. In Spanish blackout as well, we see that data gathering, collecting data was a big problem. So whether it's real time or not, record all data, at least have one copy in one place. So you should have a digital post office, although it doesn't work in real time, because this black box of the system is a server, data server, will be needed because you have to check for the data in milliseconds and in sub-regional way. Therefore, you have to make sure that the data is ready when t equals to 0. So be ready now. Do not let information vacuums. Prepare a preliminary statement and hourly communication flow. In most of the blackouts, the major problem is that everyone is calling each other. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What you should do is that you may not know the truth and you don't need to lie, but you can give the data hourly, how much you achieved, how much electrification you achieved in the last hour. You can give the maps and you can make an hourly communication and say that the next communication is 15 hours. So everyone knows that hourly basis, they will get the full information. And also have prepared a preliminary statement. You can give examples like other countries, other issues, so that the public can have a sympathization with your way of dealing things. The third one is agile grid. I think at one point we have to talk about an agile grid, because if you have too much renewables and we have less inertia and if regional inertia is important, we have to prioritize and speed up recovery. So we have to make our personnel ready for tests and trainings, that it is the recovery that matters. It's not the blackout. If you recover in less than 2 hours, no one will ask you about blackout that much. But if you recover like 8 to 12 hours at least, that is the normal timeline for a major blackout. It will create other communication problems and it will affect other infrastructure as well. The other part is technology as the toolbox. Now, TSOs are generally resist to change and resist to technology, but you can help TSOs to learn best tech. Just give them some money and say that this money is for future technologies, whether you spend it or not. For example, measuring real-time inertia, provide voltage support from all plants, utilize battery usage, having battery demonstrations that can help that ramping ups and other recovery efforts, and more automated monitoring and federated recovery. Federated recovery meaning that maybe you have some 3 major cities has the population, you can just try to recover them as soon as possible and then get the rest of the country slowly coming up behind them. And 5, snowball effect. This is very important. Every blackout has a preceding alarm signal. Even in Spain, we see that weeks before this voltage high voltage disconnection happened, I think, in some industrial facilities. So every blackout gives a signal about what will happen next. Therefore, someone or some 3 or 4, not more, group of high-level technical guys should look at the data, if possible, weekly or daily, to understand what's happening and should flag it for the regulators and others. The major problem is, I think, we have to be realistic about an agile grid. So blackout happens and recover faster, because if in a net zero scenario, if we assume that 50% of energy consumption and electricity, we have to have an agile grid. So why recovery takes 8 hours from a blackout is because you need thermal power plants to start fully. If they are disconnected, they start to cool down, and it takes time for them to ramp up and take more load over them. What may happen when we have distributed batteries? And batteries may create islands of stability and earn some time. And batteries and solar has helped in Spain as well. Not batteries, but solar helped in Spain as well. But batteries plus solar can help initial stability. And how to recover if blackout happens 11 a.m. or 5 p.m. So we have to know that there are certain scenarios which is much more likely to happen. One of them is the mid-noon blackout and then the afternoon blackout. So we have 2 blackouts that may happen. So we can design plans for that one, because a mid-noon blackout, we can use solar. But at 5 p.m., it's a different kind of scenario and study. And batteries, I think we have to be careful about the importance of batteries. They are very important, and they may help federated recovery. In Texas, what happened was they couldn't run the batteries in the first time because they were given signal from the central office or the dispatcher. Therefore, we have to be careful about how the batteries should start the recovery effort. And with solar, we can create a pseudo-thermal recovery if it happens at noon. About be ready, if a blackout happens, the worst thing you will do is that you look like the top guy and does not know a thing. This is a very bad image for the public and the trust of the public. So therefore, why don't you have a statement ready now? So I here presented an initial statement. At 12:33 today, a blackout happened. Our initial assessment study has started. We have a general idea of what happened, but we need more granular data. As you know, electricity grid is the most complicated machinery of our country. Even in Spain, it took with top European experts 8 months to resolve this issue. Since blackouts happen with cascaded problems in seconds, every single point of data must be checked. Recovery effort has started. All personnel is on the ground. The procedure has started. In these situations, recovery takes at least around 8 hours, since it is the time thermal power plants fully power up. We will be informing you at every hour with a bulletin. I think that's enough to cool off some of the anxiety in the public. And then at every hour, you publish a report saying that now everyone on dispatch center is working, now this is electrified, this is now started, these power plants are requested to start. And at every hour, state when is the next report is. Like I wrote here wrong, but 15 hours will be like one. And you should also put maps and chronology of events. Feed the public with the data, because without data, the discussion goes to a very misguided place. So the coordination problem. What is a grid? The grid is a physical entity, but what operators see is a real-time data representation of the physical entity. So anyone sitting at the dispatch center does not see the physical grid, but a data representation of the grid. So as grid becomes complex, how do you know the grid is there? With data. So post-collection of data takes months. So you should have a black box of your grid. The first rule is that make sure all data is recorded in real time, included distributed solar, batteries, everything. It doesn't need to be passed to the server in real time, but real-time data should be recorded somewhere. And copy of this data must be sent to central post office from distributed generators, distribution companies, generators, and all players. And it should be visible to everyone to some extent to solve the coordination problem. And no need to be real time. This is very important. Data of the real time may be sent to the central post office a week later, but at least it is sent. The data is there, so the grid is there, so the lifeline of grid is there. Data may be processed at the background by AI. Now, there are very good AI data, and you can ask for AI to check for the data, find the irregularities, and check whether some cascaded events happen, and it may happen. So every blackout has a preceding signal. In Heathrow or in Spain, what we see was an initiation of these events was reported before. So in TSO, ask for voltage regulation support. In other blackouts, a similar event happens a priori. Our experience also shows that generally before the blackouts, the same event, close to that event, happens in the same geographical location. Therefore, it's easier to find a blackout by looking at the past few days and see what's happening. And we cannot look every single voltage and angular stability data. What we should do is that let's have a small expert group to decide on weekly reviews, a reliability task force like group. It shouldn't be more than 3 or 4 people, but they should be technical guys because it is more complex for a regulator to understand what's the problem. But an independent expert group can really flag the problem that the transmission system or distribution system or distributed generation is having on the system. But the first rule is that prioritize. So they should be prioritizing, which is the most important problem of the week. And threat level, how this can be affect other cascaded events. And root analysis, why it happened. Is it an inverter setting? That's very important because you have like now 10,000 of the same inverters from the same company. If one of them is not working, then the other 9,999 of them has a problem. And further study and handle some data to academics to work much more in detail. So this will create a bond between the academics as well. And publish quarterly reports is important because this should be recorded in the regulatory know-how. Maybe in the future with artificial intelligence, these can be turned into much more usable data. To sum up, I would like to give you 5 things to consider back again. So the first one is mitigate coordination problem. Create the black box of the system. Make sure all the data is already there. It may not be at real time, copy to this post office or black box, but the data of everything should be there. Be ready now. There may be a blackout. Don't look like the one who is uninformed about this thing. When it happens, be ready with the initial statements, be ready with your communication forms. Agile grid, ask from TSOs to fast recovery for certain regions, for critical regions. How can they achieve faster recovery from a total blackout with thermal power generation at its lowest, 0? Technology as a toolbox is now the system is much more complicated. And like the old cars, speedometer is not enough. Now you need the FSDs, you have to see the 3D environment around the car. You have to know about the surrounding and the data and the grid. The way forward is ask the grid operator to check for the other grid operators, top of the line, the technological tools, and apply them in your country because these are measurement tools. It will not impact their way of working, but they will see at least how the system is moving. And avoid snowball effect. Some experts should flag the coming blackout, they should flag and say that, look, this is serious. And this is the way, the only way to move forward is that you as regulators or others cannot understand all these technical details, but have a reliability task force with 3 people. Let them flag, let them prioritize, let them give the threat level, and let them publish their findings, if you want, publicly, if not to the regulator. Thank you for your attention.